Today on CityCast Boise. For years, people have said to keep an eye on the bench because it will be the next big thing. Idaho Statesman reporter Nick Rosenberger is joining me to discuss a newly proposed development on Latah Street and how it could be a sign that there are changes coming to the area. But will the changes mean that we have to trade convenient parking for housing? Plus, we break down other challenges that have made it tricky to revitalize the bench. It's Tuesday, August 27th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Hey, Nick, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
You've reported that there could be a new development happening on the bench. What kind of a development is being proposed, and where is it going to be?
So if you guys know the Wild Child or the Still or Push and Pour on Bench.
Oh, yes.
On Latah Street, right next to the cemetery. There's directly across the street from that, there's this old cracked parking lot and this really old office building that's got rusted stairs and stuff. So that is potentially going to be turned into a 41 unit apartment building with ground floor commercial. So that could be more restaurants on the ground floor with 3 floors of apartments above it. So that's a really central location right near BSU, right next to Ann Morrison. It's quite close to downtown Boise. So yeah, it's an up and coming area, and folks are looking to get in on that.
I'm excited to hear more about this development and that there will be development, but man, I have loved that parking lot for when I want to go get some push and pour coffee or go to the Still or Wild Child. So I am a little sad that might go away, but I am excited about this potential. So you mentioned that there's going to be retail space on the bottom floor, and that seems to be kind of standard for a lot of the new development we're seeing in this area. Is that because of Boise's new zoning laws?
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a main driver for it. So the main folks that are heading this project, Ryan Erstad and James Maria, I spoke with Ryan Erstad and he told me that this project is kind of exactly what the new zoning code is looking for. You've got dense housing in a pretty central location. You've got ground floor retail options for folks. And from what I believe they're looking at for probably a cafe or kind of restaurant focus on that ground floor. But it's still very early in the process, still very early in the design. So we'll see what that becomes. But yes, this is, I think, what the city was looking for when it was writing the new zoning code and kind of when they were trying to adopt it and get it through was this kind of dense, what they call mixed use development.
Okay. And I'm really curious. So we talked about the parking lot is there, that super useful parking lot. And there's an office building there. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever even looked at that office building directly. It's kind of just a periphery building. Is that being used? Is that currently office space or?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever really noticed it either. I love going to Push and Pour. I love using that parking lot since, there's not a ton of parking behind. And I don't know if I ever actually saw the office as well. I don't know if it's currently in use or not. I know one of the units went up for lease through 2025 recently. So I know they're looking for at least one tenant there. I don't know if the other units are being used or not, but it is kind of an easier building to kind of overlook as you're on your way to get some food.
And we don't often hear about office buildings or an office building space being switched to residential with some retail. Will that require a zoning change, or maybe is that one of the reasons why they're putting retail space on the bottom so they don't have to do a zoning change?
Yeah, that's a good question. The office building will likely get demolished for this project. The current plans are to demolish that and then build up the building on the entire parking lot and where the office building is. They might need a zoning code change for that or conditional use permit for that. Again, this is very, very early in the process. So the developers still have to meet with the city of Boise and kind of determine what's feasible here and what's not, and then kind of jump through a lot of hoops. So there's still some things to be seen, but yeah, likely that office would get demolished for this new building.
Nick, people have described the bench I mean, for as long as I've lived here, as an up and coming area or an area that has some of the most exciting potential in Boise, would you describe it that way?
Yeah, I think so. It's for sure. There's a lot of areas that it can grow. I think a lot of developers have had their eye on the bench for a while, and there's certain buildings that have seen better days that could come back to life in a new way. Just like the Wild Child Distill and Push and Pour. That was a car wash for decades. It had that kind of iconic car cover,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't all that terribly inspiring, to be honest. And they were able to turn it into something that the community is able to enjoy, that families go to relax, and folks have business meetings, and there's reading clubs there. And I think there is a lot of opportunity for that in the Bench. And I think developers are definitely mindful of that. And there's open lots that could be converted into something that could help bring the community together. And I think there's a lot of hope for that. And I don't know how long that's going to take. You're right that it has been a very long time that folks are saying that, like, the Bench is the next big thing. And that hope, I think, could inspire that change, and kind of bring those things, those exciting businesses, those things that people want to see in their neighborhoods and their communities. I think we're in a very difficult environment for developers right now.
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates are high, construction costs are very high. We have a labor shortage in the construction industry, and so it's really difficult to make these things pencil out right now. So it might take a while, but I definitely think that interest is there for the developers and for real estate folks to kind of, make the Bench an area that folks really want to be in, and spend their time in.
Yeah, it definitely seems like developers kind of have their eye, especially maybe on the Latah Street area, as an area that could be repurposed or better used by the community. What do you think is so appealing to that area for developers, or potentially so appealing?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Bench is a very central area. If you look at a map of Boise, the Bench is pretty much the center of it. The downtown and the north end kind of run straight into the foothills, and there's not really anything past that. But if you're trying to get to Meridian or even further to Nampa or Caldwell, the Bench kind of gives you easy access to the highways to get out there. You're close to the mall. It's not a far drive to the airport. So there is a lot of these. It's very centralized, and I think a lot of people are interested in that, and especially if folks have jobs in that aren't in downtown Boise, if they're in Meridian, which a lot of folks do. I think that's a big draw for folks. There's a lot of parks there. There's you got the golf course right there, and I think this corner right here with Wild Child and the Still and Push and Pour, I think it kind of sparked something for people where they saw that and said, like, wow, this is like exciting. This is fun. And I think the developers for this project want to get in on that and kind of build that up as like the next urban core of Boise. So I think there's a lot of excitement there for that.
What are maybe some of the aspects of Latah Street that make it challenging for developers to design or build new structures? It seems like there are definitely some reasons why it hasn't exploded already.
For sure. Yeah. There's definitely some transportation issues with the Bench as well. Maybe the biking infrastructure isn't the best it could be. And there's a lot of traffic in certain areas of the Bench. So for instance, if you wanted to go to Ann Morrison Park, you have to go all the way around. There's not an easy jump from where these apartments would be to the park. You have to go basically all the way to BSU and then in through that way if you're walking or biking. So that's just like one example of things that might not be quite there yet that folks are waiting for.
Well, Nick, I do have to ask, because the minute somebody mentions new housing or apartments, everyone wants to know, how much is it going to cost to live in these brand new apartments? So how much is it going to run somebody to live in a brand new apartment that's across the street from the Still, Push and Pour, and Wild Child?
It is very early in the process. So the developers still have to meet with the city and figure things out. The developers couldn't give me a good estimate for what a unit will cost. Obviously, they have their own internal estimates to make sure that these projects pan out and that they're actually able to get a return on their investment. So they have some estimates, but maybe not solid enough to give it out to the public yet. But with that being said, we can look at nearby apartments and other developments in the area and kind of try and pinpoint where that kind of market rate would be.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if you're looking at the Parkview Apartments, which are right next to Ann Morrison Park, I believe it was recently about $2,400 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. And the Vista Apartments, which are just north of the train depot, those are kind of run on a little different basis. It's a per person kind of lease rather than like as an apartment as a whole. That's pretty common when it comes to like university and campus housing. Those apartments cost about $800 to about $1,500 per person per month. And that's dependent on, how many, like what you're getting with your apartment. So, these kind of give us a decent measure of what market rate might be. For that zip code in particular, we can also look at that and see like what the market rate, what the median rent is for this particular zip code. And for this one, at least according to Zillow data, it was most recently about $1,450 or $1,450 per month. So I imagine they would be somewhere in that range, give or take a couple $100, which can make a big difference in your paycheck. It's a massive thing. But if someone was like hoping that these are going to be cheaper than like $1,000, I would probably, temper your expectations a bit. If these are indeed market rate, they couldn't tell me if these were anywhere going to be reserved for affordable housing or not. But I think that's probably kind of the ballpark estimate for these guys.
Okay, yeah. So probably not less than 1,000. Don't hang your hopes on that.
Yeah, no, I think you'd be lucky to find that anywhere in town.
So currently, this apartment complex is just a proposal, and there's a lot of steps still before it becomes an actual real building that people can live in and rent and use. So what are the next steps? What should we keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so the developers will meet with the city and kind of receive feedback from them on their plans, on their very early designs, and kind of see what they need to do to meet city guidelines. Mm-hmm. And from there, generally projects go into like a what they call a hearing level review or an administrative review. If it goes the administrative route, then normally the developers can just work with city staff to build the project, basically, to get it fully approved by the city. And that's generally for like smaller projects. Hearing level projects are generally a lot larger. I would imagine that this would be a hearing level project, and those will have a neighborhood meeting, and then it would go to some public hearings, like the Planning and Zoning Commission would hear it, and that would have public comment. Design review might hear it, which would focus on is the color of this building going to fit with the neighborhood, that sort of stuff. And there would be public comment there. And then it would probably go to city council to get approved as well. It's still a long ways away. We might need to wait a year or two or even 3 years, especially as market conditions kind of shift and evolve. But it is a possibility. And it's honestly it's an exciting one to see and to hear about and to think about.
Well, thank you so much for breaking this down, explaining what this could mean and how some development could be coming to the bench. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back tomorrow morning with a quiz to see how well you know Boise's history. You won't want to miss it.